So let's just get started. And Claudia, why don't you introduce yourself, first of all, to our audience so that folks who do either tune in or watch the recording will know who you are and kind of what we're up to.
Great, thanks. My name's Claudia Mallchok, and I have known Kim for going on close to 20 years. We both lived in Chattanooga at the same time. I still am a resident of Chattanooga. And when Kim decided to move on, I think you went to Berkeley after GPS, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Right. So Kim moved on to pursue an opportunity at Berkeley Prep down in Tampa. And I was hired on as the Associate Director of College Guidance at Girls Preparatory School. And that is where I've done the bulk of my work. I was fortunate to be at GPS for 13 years and thrilled that both my daughters are graduates of GPS. I've got a near 21-year-old and a 19-year-old. So they were with me during my years at GPS, which was super fun, going to work with them every morning. I thought it was fun. I don't know how they felt overall. Presented some unique challenges. But in any event, when they were graduating from GPS, I decided that, this was a moment in time that I totally loved. I loved being there with them, but I was ready to do something different. So I left GPS and just took a couple of years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Did I want to stay in college guidance, or did I want to work at a flower shop, which I did for a while. Made beautiful creations and were around fresh flowers daily. But, there was still this tug of, I'm not interacting with students, I'm not working with students. Quite honestly, I was starting to feel a little out of touch. I didn't know the music quite as well. I didn't know the lingo because I wasn't around teenagers. So Kim and I have been working together for a number of months, and she has hired me on to Stodge Hill College Consulting, and I'm going to be doing independent consulting with students, I'm guessing primarily in the Chattanooga area, but I have some outreach in Cleveland, Ohio, which is where I grew up. So we're excited to be expanding this to some other cities and getting just some other types of schools and increasing our diversity and base of clients.
Absolutely. And I think it's, we together, I think it's important to point out, will have a collaborative effort as we work together with students from all over. And that's, been sort of the blessing and the curse of the pandemic is that, my husband got a new job during the pandemic. So it meant me moving, but it meant that everybody was doing Zoom work, and has, again, allowed us to really think outside the box and how we can serve students from lots of different areas. But again, I'll primarily still focus on Charlotte, which is my home base. And then, as Claudia mentioned, probably Chattanooga and Cleveland for her, which are two separate home bases for her. You haven't lived in Cleveland in a while, I realize,
right.
But we're excited. And I think what families will see from this addition too is just, we will have some new creative ideas. We will partner some on our, especially presentations and workshops that we will do together. So it will be a more combined effort in terms of our years of knowledge of working with different types of students, different types of colleges. And so I'm really excited about it. And I think we're going to be able to serve a lot of people in that realm. So let's dive into a couple of things. Let me first say to our attendees, though, obviously we're here to answer questions today. So you can either unmute, you can raise your hand, you can drop something in the chat box or the Q&A box, however you would like to have questions addressed. You chime in whatever way works best for you. We have a couple of topics that were either sent in ahead of time or that Claudia and I just thought about ahead of time that we thought would be important for us to touch on today, just to kind of bring people up to speed on where kind of the process is right now. So I'm going to start with a couple of those, but like I said, audience, please, you all jump in with what you have questions about as we go. But why don't we start talking a little bit about test optional? And I'm going to put you back on the spot, Claude, actually, and say, why don't you jump in with your thoughts on that, and we can kind of tag team on what we're hearing, where we're headed with test optional again in this coming admission cycle.
I think the thing that most readily comes to people's mind when they think about test optional is there's this reluctance to submit test optional because people are afraid, are schools truly, quote, test optional? Or is that going to hinder my application if I don't submit my test scores? Or, the logical explanation is if I'm going test optional, my test scores are not up to par. They're not in the middle 50% range of what that school is accepting. And that's typically the barometer by which you use whether or not you decide to go test optional. I mean, if you've got a high end on their acceptance, why wouldn't you submit it? If you're on the low end of their acceptance, you wouldn't accept it or submit it, excuse me. But I don't know how we can stress enough that if colleges have made the decision to go test optional, they mean it. They do not make this decision lightly. That's why not all schools are test optional. I mean, I can't imagine the number of conversations and the data point that schools look at before they make this decision. So I think it's important for people to know that this is not a decision that schools make lightly, but schools are committed to being test optional once they say they are. And I don't know how to more clearly state it you've got to just trust us on this. We know what we're talking about. We talk with deans and directors and VPs of enrollment across the country, and time again, they say, we mean it. They may require you to submit your test scores for certain scholarship applications, for certain honors programs, but if they're test optional for admissions, that's what it means.
Absolutely. And I think, well, important to note, since I know some of our listeners are definitely from North Carolina, if you haven't already heard, for next year, the state of North Carolina has already decided to be test optional again. So for our state flagships, that's going to be another part of the process. And the way I handled that this year with families and students, not just for our in-state options, but around the country, we talked, just as Claudia mentioned, about where do you fall in the range of test scores. And literally for some students' list of applications, we made every individual decision about, are you sending test scores here? Yes to here, no to here. I mean, and it became a very strategic approach to how we handled it, because it is anxiety provoking, but with the data that we have, we know how to help them determine best where to send versus not to send if optional is the option that they have. The other thing that has come up that is a term, it's probably been around for a while, but I just am more aware of it this year, is test blind. And we've heard about need blind admissions for years, but in some cases, schools have literally decided to be test blind, meaning they are absolutely not looking at anyone's test scores anymore. So there's some nuances in that. Obviously, it will depend on the student's list, and we would have to dig into all the details. Like, this is the problem with the college process. It is not streamlined. You can't just say, this is what every school is doing, or this is what every school accepts or wants. So when it comes to test blind admissions, we would have to really kind of make sure we're digging in and we have that list that we can look at to determine who those are, so students can be informed about that in the process. But any questions from the audience regarding test optional admissions or testing in general, if that sparked any questions for anyone?
This is not necessarily, I don't mean to be a tongue in cheek, but with test optional and with almost any question that is asked about colleges admissions, is the first answer that always comes to mind is it depends. It depends. It depends on the school. It depends on the student. It depends on circumstances. I mean, and I know people don't want to hear that, but it's true. It's very true. This is such an individualized process. And that's why if you are working, with Kim and I, you can be rest assured that you're going to get that individualized attention to craft your application so it is as individualized as possible. But that whole, it depends. It's a frustration, certainly probably more for students than parents. Well, I don't know. As soon as I said that, I thought maybe not.
I'm sure. Students tend to roll with things. We parents.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I just thought of that about it depends. Yeah. The other thing, I just want to make one other mention of test optional, Kim, is colleges, even if they won't readily admit this, they all agree that testing is not the most significant indication of student success in college. They know that. They know the best indication of student success is students' record in high school and how they've performed in high school. I mean, it just makes sense. Yep. How many of us here, time and time again, have a student with strong tests or strong grades, strong skill set, but their testing is below the mark. It doesn't coincide.
Right.
That's because standardized testing in and of itself is flawed. And tests, if everybody's being 100% honest, they will readily admit that. Now, schools won't come out and say that because for a lot of reasons, which is a whole other, we could get into a whole other discussion. But so just know that schools know that that's not the best indicator for success. And that's, so it may be something that they look at, but it's not oftentimes the number one thing they look at. It just isn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to turn to college visits for the next topic. And I'll start on this one because I've actually just come back from 2 college visits with my own child.
How did that feel?
It's very eye-opening to be going through this process now with my own. And I'm probably going to have to hire Claudia to take care of him because, we'll butt heads the whole time.
Right. Of course you will.
Together. But 2 things. One is it's important to note that lots of campuses are reopening. So if you are the parent of a rising senior or even rising junior and you're trying to plan getting out to see some places, more and more are offering, at least starting June and July, opening up their campuses and having people back for visits. So we've just done a couple ourselves. And my son is a rising junior, so this is very early in the process for him. But it was very eye-opening and a good reminder to me, and just something I take for granted because of the work I do, that oftentimes kids get into these situations and get on these tours and on campuses, and they might not even know what to ask. They don't even necessarily know what college life is like, unless perhaps they've had an older sibling or this is something they've been practicing for a much longer amount of time. And, even living in our household around me, my son definitely didn't have a set list of questions to begin with when we got to our first tour. And so what I noticed though is that he was very much listening and he was taking it all in. And I could tell that, especially at the end when we sat down for lunch and had a conversation and he recounted the things that he liked or didn't like. So, I think as parents, one, we want them to sort of show up and engage, and we feel like maybe they are being somehow judged when they're on these campus visits.
And they may be.
Do what?
And they may be.
And they may be, yes, but they are also teenagers, and these tour guides and these admissions folks have seen the gamut of it. And, just because you don't ask the perfect question in a college information session does not mean you're not going to be admitted. I think it's also important as parents that we remember too, not to take over. Not to just insert ourselves into that entire visit process either. In fact, some of the best visits I've ever been on have been when they've divided students and parents. And let the student take a tour and the parents take a tour, and it becomes a very separate part of the process. And I think the students feel a little more free to talk to
completely different
tour guides. Exactly. But that is certainly something that Claudia and I can help with. Really where I'm going with all this is that if you're getting ready to do some college visits and your student feels like they don't even know where to start, what am I asking? What am I looking for? We've actually taken students on these kinds of tours ourselves, our school-based students plus our own children now, but we can help you formulate a list of questions, share ideas with what to be looking for, what you're listening for, what are some things that will help you discern the differences even between campuses and how you might feel about one versus the other. Sometimes it kind of runs together, to be honest with you. After you start to do a lot of them, there are some real similarities, but then it comes down to what are the things that really stand out for your child. But so let us know if you're getting prepared to do some of these things and you guys feel like, I don't know where to start. And I know my kid doesn't know where to start. We can certainly talk about that. It's an exciting time, but it was fun to be back on some campuses. And
so did you and Cam talk about a question that he would ask? Did you have like a stock question?
We didn't ahead of time. And so that was also a lesson learned for mom/college counselor now. And it was fine because I wanted him to kind of see like what is even being discussed. And then from that, in our follow-up conversations, there were a few things he talked about.
So I'm sure that's something that'll happen going forward now.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, and depending on the age of the student, they're going to be better prepared for it anyway. A year from now when he's actually in school as a junior or even as a rising senior next summer, I think he'll have a different approach, and he will have learned even more about what he wants and what he's interested in and things like that. I often say college tours, even when it means they don't like a place and they end up taking it off their list, there is value in that. And, otherwise it can be hard to narrow down a list of colleges. And, we certainly ended up taking one school off our list after our visits. He decided he didn't like it, and there's no reason to keep pushing, and, no reason for him to keep pursuing it.
Do you think it's okay if you're on a tour? I'm thinking specifically if you're literally walking around a campus touring, and without a doubt that this place is not a fit for you or your student. I mean, do you think it's okay? Is it rude? Is it acceptable, or is it not to leave the tour? I mean, you've got a busy day and you're looking at your watch going, really,
Sure.
Do we need to commit another hour here if this is, what do you think?
I mean, I think you give it a fair enough shot, maybe the first, 30 minutes. I don't know. You can decide. Our tour was a very long one, so we spent some time tooling around, even though we knew it was not going to be the place for him. But, sure, if you're absolutely sure that you're taking it off the list and you're not going to apply, there's no, excuse yourself if you need to. I mean, I've known people who've done that for sure.
I've actually done it before.
Yeah.
I did it once when I was touring with Nikki.
Yeah.
We just gave each other the look, and she's just like, can we go get lunch somewhere? You know?
Sure. I mean,
and I think as long as you're respectful and, maybe go up to the tour guide and say, just so you're not looking for us, we didn't lag behind. Right. Thank you for your time. We're going to head out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's again, individualized. And I think it also depends. And sometimes as a parent, I think we want kids to see things through to the end because, we think that's what they're supposed to do. But, I think as parents, you can also judge how it's going and make that determination on the spot of, we're out of here. So,
it could be a good bonding moment.
Right. Exactly. Any questions from participants about that, about visiting colleges or college research in general at this stage of the game? All right. No worries. We got more topics to continue with. So let's talk a little bit about essay writing. And Claude, why don't you start and share, what are your top 2 or 3 tips when it comes to essay writing, or any other words of wisdom you have to share?
So I'm gonna start off by sharing one of my most favorite essays I ever wrote, or I ever read, was actually written by my niece, who wrote about her love of pajamas and how she just felt comfort and safe. And when she put on her pajamas, whether she was studying or journaling or talking on the phone or watching Netflix, it put her in a place that was just all about her. And, people are like, seriously, she wrote an essay on pajamas? Yes. And she had a very successful application season. And, this was years ago. She's looking at graduate school now. So this was a long time ago when she was going through the process. But I did know one of the admission reps at one of the schools she ultimately attended. And they, of course, said, we loved Parker's essay on pajamas because it was different. It was fun. And they remembered it. And so that's the thing about the college essay. People get so stressed out, understandably so, about the college essay. The majority of us have not had life-changing experiences. I mean, I haven't, most of us, fortunately, have not had to go through harrowing, tragedies or highs or, incredible lows. We've just lived life. Our life has been different from everybody else's, but we've just lived it. So I think to think about the mundane and the everyday and the things that make you uniquely you, and if you can figure out what that is, that's the start of a great essay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my first thought.
Sure. And I 100% agree with that. I love topics that are a little bit off the beaten path. Students will often hear me say it kind of this way too. And not just me, lots of college admissions professionals say this, what are we going to learn about you that we don't know from other parts of your application. And so sometimes it is that more unique approach to writing that actually gets that across. So anyway, carry on. You've got more tips, I know.
Oh, I do. So yeah, so what is something unique, sometimes the mundane. I think when you start writing your essay, if whether or not you're actually going through the process with a coach or going to like one of our workshops and kind of doing something that's a little bit more structured to try to help you guide you through the essay writing process, the first thing that everybody needs to do is sit down and just brainstorm.
Absolutely.
And for a lot of people, brainstorming is super hard. And there's great ways to get your mind free to brainstorm, and maybe we can even do some of those in one of our future coffees or another venue. But nothing is too absurd to put on the table. Absolutely. And that includes writing about the big game. That's not the college essay that people want to read or that people should be writing, and by the big game, I mean, the stereotypical high school sporting event where the student was the person who led the team to victory, and they were down in the end of the game, and then they threw the incredible touchdown and the stands erupted and they were the hero. I mean, it doesn't matter what sport, it doesn't matter whether they won or they lost. It's cliche, it's boring, it's been done, and I don't believe it can be written anymore. But that doesn't mean don't write it down as a brainstorming option, because maybe there's something in there that you can pull apart and take from that. The essay just has to focus so much on the student. And so likes and dislikes, what do you like? What do you not like? Why do you like to paint your nails, 10 different colors? Or do you always use the exact same OPI color? That can talk to your spontaneity. That can talk to, you like order, you like discipline. So you have to kind of look at the things that, again, just seem so much a part of your daily life that you don't even think about them. And I think from some of those things, you can extract the beginnings of a college essay. Mm-hmm. I also think this is one area where family members can be helpful, because a lot of times, especially for a 17, 18-year-old, it's hard. I mean, they don't know themselves yet. They're discovering who they are. And they can say, well, everybody does that. That's not unique to me. Well, everybody does it. Where you're looking at them going, no, everybody doesn't think that like that. Right. One of my daughters is extremely analytical. She has the ability to either just look at directions, like how to sew. She can just kind of flip through a book and it says how to sew. And then she just goes and sews. She just puts things together. She's mechanical in that way. She was trying to put together my grill this weekend, and that didn't go so well because there was a part missing, but you get what I'm saying. She can just pull things together. So she thinks everybody can do that. She thinks everybody can pick up knitting needles and just knit. Right. She's tried to teach me to knit 6 times now, and I still haven't made anything. So I could tell her about that trait of hers, and she doesn't see it for herself. So that was a long-winded way of saying, engage your family members. Maybe over dinner one night, say, this is Kim's dinner. Let's tell Kim all the things about her that we love about her and that what make her uniquely her. And jot them down on a little note card. Or even better yet, do it kind of blind. Just write on a note card, gather friends and family and say, these are the things I think about when I think about Kim. She's outgoing, she's a leader, she's analytical, she's creative, she's compassionate. And then maybe give some examples of those. And those could spur things. That could be the beginning of a brainstorming topic or session. Sure. It's a completely different way of looking at it, because never once are you talking about the essay. You're talking solely about the student.
Absolutely. Yep. That's great. I love that. And and from that, when it's almost like you start this essay differently than others with the end in mind. Like, what are those characteristics that I want them to know about me? And then where is a backstory that illustrates it? And don't always think that way. And so it's a different process too. And sometimes students feel stuck when they start this essay, because it does work a different flow kind of in terms of what we're working on to get that final message across of here, the theme really is, that's the theme. Like, I want to demonstrate that I'm analytical. So now I need a backstory to support that. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great.
The other thing I think it's important to remember is you never know who's going to be reading your essay. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be multiple people reading your essay. So unlike, as you were saying, other forms of writing, if you're writing an article, you know where the article is going to be published and who your target audience is. So you can write to your target audience. You don't know your target audience except that they're in admissions. Right. They could be a 75-year-old retired dean of admissions who has come out of retirement to read college essays. Conversely, it could be a 22, 23 college admission officer who is only a couple years ahead of you. Their views are going to be radically different. Their comfort level with different topics is going to be radically different. So not knowing that, how do you approach something if you don't know who's reading it? What do you think, Kim?
I agree. I think you have to be comfortable with your topic no matter what. Yeah. And that's what I've told students. And in fact, this is one of my favorite all-time essay stories. So years ago, I had a student who, he literally wanted to type his essay on a typewriter. Now, granted, we had trouble even finding a typewriter because this was, while it was years ago, it was 15 years ago. So we were already using computers.
Right.
Typewriters were hard to come by, but he was sort of old fashioned in a weird kind of way. That's not the best way to describe it, but he was creative and he wanted to use that typewriter to tie into the story about how I am old fashioned about certain things, even though he had wildly colored hair and he was, to me, he was not old fashioned in any kind of way. But ultimately, he didn't do that. We were struggling with how we would actually electronically submit. But I told him at that point, this is a risk, but it's a calculated risk. Mm-hmm. So if you follow through with it, know that some schools may love it and some schools may not. So while he didn't type it on the typewriter, he still wrote the story essentially the same way. I
like it.
And it worked. He told a great story, and he, he didn't do too shabby. Didn't get into his first choice school, but ended up at the University of Chicago, who always tends to like really unique essays anyway. Yes. So it was really good for him. But I loved his creativity. But my point of all that was just, I think there are always going to be calculated risks as you're choosing what you're going to talk about. Topics like, especially about religion and politics, beliefs around those areas can be
clear.
They can be tough, but I've had a lot of students do them over the years too. And my statement to them is always, if you're going to do this, again, there are calculated risks involved in this. And if the school doesn't like it or the reader doesn't like it, okay, but then chances are somebody else on your list just might. So it can be overthought, that's for sure. I think we spend a lot of time agonizing about what is the perfect topic, and there's not one. There's so many things that have been written about, and it comes back to making it uniquely about you, the student.
Right. I think humor, you have to be careful with humor.
Good point.
I think I'm really funny. Kim thinks I'm funny, fortunately.
Right, yes.
But not everybody appreciates my humor.
Right.
So I've only seen one essay that I felt really worked with humor. And the other thing is, again, a 17 or 18-year-old, their brand of humor it's just different. Yeah. So same thing like you were saying about religion, politics, that sort of thing. Humor should be in that. If you're going to do it, know that it's a calculated risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I just wanted to mention, and I don't have the entire prompt here. I was trying to write it down. And since this webinar happened just before ours, I haven't had a chance to look it up, but Common App just announced that they're adding a new prompt for next year's. It'll go live August 1st. And it's a response to COVID and the pandemic. It's something along the lines of reflect on something that has generated gratitude. An experience that you've had that people, that you found yourself grateful for people, grateful for opportunities, grateful for situations. So we'll get the specifics on that, obviously, in the exact wording, but just know that there is a new prompt for Common App next year.
And to clarify, it's one of the among the 7 choices. So
Yes,
it's
I'm
not a
sorry. Thank
required
you.
question to answer. It is just one of the 7 choices of prompts.
Right.
Which actually, I think at this point you can Google Common App prompts for 21, 22 and find the full list of them.
Okay, cool.
But but yeah, that one's interesting. I've had a lot of students look at it and kind of go, I'm not sure. So
right.
It'll be interesting.
Well, then maybe it's not for you.
How many people answer it. Right, exactly. And that's actually another tip I sometimes give students, come to think of it, is that I don't worry so much about what prompt it is right up front, usually when we're starting the writing process, because the prompts are actually pretty broad, even though they kind of direct you in certain areas. I think it is possible that some essays could actually fit multiple prompts. And so I always tell the students, like, we're just going to write first. And as we go through the process, it's going to start to become clear what is the prompt that you're answering, so that you select the right one when you're ticking the box when you've got to submit it on your application. But I think that adds another layer at times of them feeling like, I have to get this part just right. I do think it does matter with supplemental questions where the prompts are intentionally very specific. That's the word. So we want to explain what supplemental essays are in case there are parents who don't know exactly what I'm talking about.
Sure. So the Common App has one essay, a required essay, maximum of 650 words. That is that you can only upload one, right? That's still the case. Once you upload your essay, you cannot change your general essay for different schools. It's a one essay per applicant situation. But individual schools can ask supplemental questions that are unique to their school and unique information that they want to receive. For example, again, Common App, changes to Common App. In the beginning of Common App, under just the demographic information, they used to ask about religious preference. That question's been entirely removed from the demographics. But if a school is a faith-based institution, my guess is there's a very good chance that they're going to ask a supplemental question about your faith. How did you come to your faith? Talk about your faith. Why is it important to you? Whatever is going to make sense for that institution. Excuse me. So that's basically what a supplemental essay question is. It's just unique to the school.
Yeah, and it can range. Every school can have different ones. A common one that multiple schools will use, but obviously it has to be answered very specifically for them, is why us? Why do you find us a good fit for you? Why is Emory the best place for you to apply? And it can get tiresome for kids, honestly, because you might have to answer that question 5 different times, and it has to be very specific to the school. And it's something that's, it's a nuanced part of the process that we really can't work on this part of it until after August 1st, because August 1st is when the Common App will reopen for this rising senior class of 2022. And that's when we can confirm what are the supplemental questions that colleges are asking. But I often tell students, as we work even on the main essay, well, 2 things. One, going back to brainstorming. Sometimes brainstorming, while you may leave something out for your main essay, there could be a little nugget in there that's going to be helpful for one of these supplemental essays, depending on what they're asking. But I often go ahead and tell students to be prepared for that question about what it is about a particular school that has appealed to them. Why did they decide to apply? Because they can do some of that research and be thinking about that as they're visiting and as they're, just as they're putting their list together, even for themselves to say, why did I put this college on my list? And it can't just be because mom and dad went to school there. That could be a starting point, but it has to dig in a little deeper than that. So good stuff about essays. And if you don't know, most of you all are getting the newsletters and things like that, updates about our essay workshops this summer. But just let me explain real quickly that our flexible plan with writing essays this summer is that you can pick any week essentially that works for you, other than vacation weeks, that when we couldn't meet live with students. But the way the plan works is there is actually some pre-recorded information that students will watch, sort of lessons throughout the week. And then at various points in that week, there is a one-on-one meeting with the counselor to actually go through the brainstorming, to go through drafts, to then do the final revision and be done with it. And the goal is that by condensing it into this really compact, really efficient method, you get the essay written in a week, which is pretty darn cool if you're trying to get that done before school starts this summer.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Kim, we have a question over here. I don't know if you saw it or not. We have a question.
Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it.
What can I do to discover if hiring an independent counselor is right for my child?
Oh, great question.
Yeah.
I think I would say it starts a little bit with self-evaluation. And, I do this when I talk to families on the phone in our initial inquiry. And I know some of you are maybe here to just learn about us and, are trying to decide if you want to hire somebody. But what I start with is I want to know where the student is in the process and also where the parents are in the process, and find out where the support really needs to come in.
Right.
Some people need soup to nuts, everything from A to Z, plus accountability throughout the senior year to make sure that the student is staying on track, to make sure that they don't miss deadlines. And, as the mother of a boy who likes to put things off and procrastinate, that's exactly what I'm going to need. So I try to understand that first and foremost is how much and what level of support is needed. That varies also somewhat depending on what age families come to us in terms of, the support you provide for a sophomore student, for example, is going to be different than what we're doing in senior year. That's natural. But we try to meet students where they are and figure out what we can do to sort of scaffold them throughout this process. I also talk a lot about, oftentimes it's my job to take away the friction that comes with this process at home. You as parents are able to relate to this, I'm sure. There are times when our kids will listen to anybody else but us, even if we're saying the exact same thing.
Yep.
And at home, it becomes a battle. Whereas I sit down with the student and I say, hey, you've got 1 week to write your resume for me, and I'm going to need that by next Wednesday. Oh, yes, ma'am. And I'll get it. And it's done. And we don't have to have a conflict about it. And then that also takes that stress out of the home life and it makes it easier. I think that it's also important to, we talk a lot about match and fit when it comes to finding the right college. I think you got to find the right match and fit with the counselor that you choose.
Absolutely.
And, it varies depending on personality and just some things like that. And, I think the thing that I'll put in a plug for Claudia and I both about is that we actually worked in independent schools. We did this job with students for years. We actually also both have worked on college campuses, and I've read applications, and we've just had a different level of experience than, for example, somebody who has never worked in a school setting or hasn't worked specifically in a college guidance setting and is transitioning to this work from some other field. And there are a lot of folks out there like that. And that doesn't mean that after several years they can't know the process and be good at what they do. I just think we have unique perspectives coming from actually literally working in a school environment where this was the sole focus of our day-to-day jobs.
Well, I mean, I think to kind of not clarify that point, but to drive that point home, Kim and I have sent thousands of kids to college. I've sent 2 of my own,
right?
Across, 2 of my own daughters, but we've sent thousands of kids off. And not only have we sent them off, we hear from them still. I mean, I still hear from my students that were in that first class, that when I felt I was so green and I didn't know what I was doing and how am I ever going to really support these kids, I still hear from them. And, those are the best stories. The stories where, the student didn't feel a strong sense of self. They were comparing themselves with other students in their school, and they didn't think they were as good as. I'm thinking of one girl in particular who was a very solid B student, a great student. She had nothing higher than a B on her transcript, which just bugged the heck out of her. And I thought, well, that's great. You also have a life and you do other things and you're super interesting. But Sophie went on to find a great school that was a great fit for her. She's gone on to graduate school. She's highly, highly successful, and she's back here in Chattanooga, so I get to run into her once in a while. And when I look at her, she's obviously, a grown woman at this point, but I still see that 17, 18-year-old, that little glimmer of the young Sophie, who was so apprehensive and so unsure of herself and just felt like she had nothing to offer. And, that breaks my heart when I see that in students, but then I always know that we're going to get beyond that. So it's that moment when they see, oh, I do have value, I do have worth, and a school wants me. Kind of goes back to that, what we were talking about, essay questions. When you take a calculated risk, you want to go where you're wanted.
Yeah.
You want to go to a school that wants you, and not every school is going to want you, just like not every date that you go on is going to be a positive date, and that you're going to want to go on a second one.
Right.
But, why chase after something that doesn't want you back? It's contrary.
Yeah. Good point. And Denise, again, thanks for asking the question. And I would just add that you all, if you're still at that stage trying to determine if you need a counselor in your life like us, we offer free 20-minute conversations, calls to talk about that and to discuss what it is that your student might need or you as a parent might need. Sometimes we're doing this, we say we're doing it for the students, but there's a lot of parental support that goes into this process too. And I think what happens is, there's a lot to know. And it goes back to that whole it depends part of this process. If this isn't your profession, why would you begin to want to know everything that there is going on in the world of college admissions? And that's where we can also be supportive, because that is our job, and that's what we are here to do, is to be.
It's our job, and it's also our job, but it's also our love. I know that both Kim and I, whenever we go on a road trip, whether it's a fun road trip with girlfriends, or I was driving up to Cleveland from Chattanooga, 600-mile trip the other couple weeks ago. I mean, we will pull off the interstate and drive through a college campus. We love, it's just part of what we do. I've dragged girlfriends onto college campuses midway through a road trip. I'm like, you got to give me an hour and you guys can, go get a drink or something or shop while I go tour campus, but I've got to see the school. So I don't know where I was going with that. Just that
it's part of what we do.
It's part of what we do. It's part of who we are.
Absolutely.
I want to mention one quick thing, just in terms of this question, should you hire a college counselor, and how we can support parents in the process. And this is just like a little freebie tidbit. Parents will get so fraught with anxiety about this, and that's going to manifest itself in a lot of different ways. And I would make a plea to parents that maybe starting right now, but definitely starting during the school year, particularly if your student is a senior, please don't talk about college 24/7. Sit down at the beginning of the school year and say, look, we're not going to do this all the time. I'm not going to nag you every day about it. I'm not going to ask you. The student can talk about it as much as they want. That's the caveat here. The student gets to kind of break the rule and talk about it, but the parent can't do it all the time. So pick a time during the week. For a lot of families, that's Sunday afternoon. After the weekend, people are kind of gearing back up for the work week, for the school week, and say Sundays at 5 o'clock, we're going to have a half hour, we're going to have an hour family quote meeting. And it can be formal, it can be informal. You can go do it on a walk so it doesn't feel like you're sitting there staring at each other. And that's the time that the parent is allowed to ask questions of the student. What are you thinking about this school? How is your essay coming? Have you done any more test prep for the upcoming ACT, SAT? But just don't bombard the student the minute they get in the car. Don't bombard them the night you're trying to have just a nice family dinner. And then everybody knows Sundays at 5, we're going to talk about it. And maybe weekly for some families is too frequent.
Sure.
I'd be hard pressed to almost think that it's too infrequent. I think you can cover a lot of information once a week in an hour.
I agree.
Probably enough.
Yeah.
So that's just a little tidbit of how to get through this process sanely.
Absolutely. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Denise.
I do want to quickly touch on teacher recommendations, and I'm conscious of our time, so I want to stay on time and be done at 11. But I've heard from a lot of students as we've talked about teacher recommendations this year, their concerns about, we were mostly remote. I don't know these junior year teachers that well.
Right.
There's anxiety building around a lot of that, and I think two things I want to point out is that, we've all been in this together. Globally,
Right.
we've been in this together. I know there are some schools, independent schools were in person more than our public school system, for example, in Charlotte was, but still, college admissions folks understand the differences and the context in which that letter is being written. So if a letter from a teacher, for example, doesn't sound as perhaps in depth this particular year, what we're going to be helping students do is make sure that it's also clear we were not in school until March or April.
Right.
And even then I opted not to go back for my own health and safety. And so I just decided to stay remote the entire year. There are lots of nuances and caveats about that. So one, just helping families and students understand that colleges are going to get that too, that there are definitely going to be some less than stellar record, not a bad record. I shouldn't even say it that way. It's just maybe not going to be as personal and as in depth because we're meeting each other through the computer screens as opposed to face to face. There's
Right.
also a growing list of schools who are saying, if you feel better asking somebody from sophomore year, ask them. And
Right.
I actually have luckily have some colleagues who like to compile lists, and they have been gracious to share that with me and are continuing to update it. And so we will have, as we work with students, Claudia and I will have that information. So if there is somebody who's on the fence and really thinks, no, I really feel better about asking a 10th grade teacher, I'd really like to do that. The key really is, to me, you're picking your core academic teachers to write these primary
Absolutely.
recommendations for you. That means English, math, science, history, and world language. Those are your 5 core academic areas. Some students will have a compelling reason to ask an electives teacher to do it. And I'm always open to that conversation as long as.
What's an example of a compelling?
So for example, I have a student who is very involved in DECA, and their advisor to DECA is also their marketing teacher at school.
Okay.
So there's a combination of ways that teacher knows the student. And we made the decision that would work in addition to the AP English teacher who's also writing for that student. So
Sure.
There are, those are the kinds of conversations that we're having to make sure that we feel like the best possible support is coming across.
Right.
And then more and more colleges are actually opening the door to being receptive to outside recommenders, meaning somebody like a coach,
Right.
somebody who advises you in your volunteer service, which is not related to school.
An employer even.
An employer, somebody from church, lots of different ways to do that. And so I'm really working hard with students this year to say, we're going to find the best people wherever they come from and make sure that you're feeling supported, even if you don't necessarily feel as connected to these junior teachers.
Are more letters better?
Up to a point. The thicker the file, the thicker the kid, that old saying. So I do think there's a point at which you tip the value the wrong way. If you
Yep.
send too many that colleges have either not approved or not asked for, it does become a little bit of a red flag. Like, what are you trying so hard to tell us about yourself?
Right.
If you've chosen wisely, you have good support, you have good people writing for you, and you don't need to push it beyond that. And that's
Right.
why, even with those outside recommendations, we don't send them unless it's clear from the Common App that they are accepted. And we
Right.
work with individual students on that as we actually complete their applications to say, okay, this school will take it, this school will not. And so here's where we will upload it and here's where we will not. And, that's just, we need to be respectful of what the colleges are asking for in this process too. Anything else you'd add about teacher recommendations?
No, I think sometimes students think they should only ask teachers that they have a good grade in the class.
That's a good point. True.
And some of the strongest recommendations I've read are from teachers who the students struggled in their class.
Yep.
And, I mean, struggled, like maybe they even got, God forbid, a C in a class.
That's fair, but yeah.
And that class was not their forte. They were a humanities student and they were in physics or they were in chemistry, but you know what? They stuck it out. They got extra help. They persevered and they proved something to themselves. They proved that they'll never take another chemistry class.
Right.
But in addition to that, they showed that they had the fortitude to stick with it, and that a C was a good grade for them, and that's okay. Wish we could get away from this idea of good and bad grades. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, if you've taken away some new knowledge and you've I don't want to say you get a grade for just participation, but if you've learned something, there's value in that class.
Sure.
We have
to overhaul the whole college admission system before we can go that.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
It'll take a while.
Right.
I also hear students say things to me like, this teacher doesn't like me. And, and I can definitely remember feeling that way with certain teachers in high school. And my son feels that way about certain teachers now. And, but that's also not the point. You don't have to be in this mutually adoration filled relationship. It's also transactional in some ways. Can the teacher still say that you show up and you participate and you contribute interesting tidbits of information, that you do your work, or that you completed some project or wrote some paper that was impressive and outstanding? And okay, if that's the case, that's actually what matters most to the colleges. They're looking for the teacher to describe you as an academician, as a student. What are you doing? And so, but students will often rule people out just because, oh, he doesn't like me, she doesn't like me. But
right.
So
I just wanted to add one other suggestion for students. If particularly if you're in a larger high school and you don't have a college counselor who's working with you on a more individualized basis, you can still take an active role in your recommenders process. And by that, I mean, as a student, you can send an email to a teacher and say, first of all, will you be willing to write my letter of recommendation? And once they say yes, you can follow up with, these are the things that this is how I think I excelled in your class, or this is how I struggled in your class. This is what I hope you'll get across in your letter. Most recommenders by and large should not, I don't believe, share letters of recommendation. And they're like, what, you mean I'm never going to get to see it? No matter what, there's still this idea that if I show you the letter of recommendation, I'm not going to be as authentic in what I write, because even if I write a great letter, if I say one thing that was a struggle for you, you're going to take that as a negative, and that's not the way it's intended. So it's a good idea for students to advocate on their own behalf with their recommenders, and maybe even in bullet points. I wanted to come across that I've got tenacity, that I, have a level of confidence when I'm speaking with my peers, and that I absolutely love American history. If you can hit those three topics or those three bullet points, then this is going to be a good letter of recommendation.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of teachers are actually really receptive to that information.
Oh my gosh.
The more I work with students in similar high schools, so I'm starting to understand patterns of certain teachers. There are some who are literally prepared to ask those questions immediately after they say yes anyway, because they know it helps them. And so it really is a good idea to take control of that when you can. Any questions about teacher recommendations or anything else as we wrap up? We've got about 5 minutes left. So with the last few minutes, anything folks have on their mind that we haven't touched on today? I would just say that things for rising seniors, especially to be focused on right now, are finalizing their college list, getting thoughts around where they plan to apply this fall, then working on their primary essay, making sure their resume is written and up to date so that we'll have it for including in their applications, getting these teacher recommendations taken care of, and then finalizing standardized testing. Because then if you can get most of that done ahead of school starting, the fall will really be about knocking out the actual application and getting those things submitted on time by the deadlines.
And one other thing, Kim, if folks don't know, you can create a Common App application right now. And even though Common App doesn't go live for the class of 2022, any information that you create in an account right now will roll over. So some of the demographics, I mean, your name, your address, your parents' names, those types of things, you can do all that ahead of time. And
Right.
like I said, it will roll over as of August 1st, and you
Right.
won't have to do it a second time.
And Claudia and I are working on our dates for when we will present college or common application overviews. I'm really tired of the word boot camp. Lots of people use application boot camp. So we're also going to get creative with a new title, but we will be offering probably 2 or 3 sessions. We've got to work out some calendar issues and make sure we know dates that we're ready to present that. So if students just need a place to come to have, that general overview, to get the information, the basics, and make sure that their applications are being completed correctly, we'll be offering that. And then obviously clients we're working with already on an individual basis, we can sit down and review applications together. I like to see everything before it is submitted to make sure it is proofread, carefully done, that the activities descriptions are strong and really stand out with leadership and responsibility, the important points we're trying to get across in that area. So stay tuned for information on that. We'll try to get those dates together and get those out ASAP. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And we are taking a break from Coffee with Kim in July, and it will be back in August, but we are actually going to switch it up and make it evening time. I don't think we're going to call it Cocktails with Kim, but we're gonna change it up a little bit too, to include Claudia, so that we are both here and able to answer questions and present on various topics throughout the next year. So stay tuned for that as well. And we'll be presenting that probably in our August newsletter with all of the new dates and the topics that we'll be covering throughout the year. So looking forward to it. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.